Hey everybody, it's me, Queenie Brown. Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesdays. I'm so glad you decided to join me again today. Last week we talked about healing emotional wounds, and I had some really interesting responses from the conversation we had last week. It was really deep. Many of you took my challenge and decided to go ahead and pay attention to your lives and just to kind of be sensitive to the way that you were moving through last week to notice whether or not you had something on your filter that might need to be addressed. So I did the same thing, and it was interesting because something came up for me, and it was just yesterday, and I didn't realize that this was still on my filter, but it was pretty powerful. Before I go into that, I wanted to make sure that if you, I'm not going to be checking comments right now because I'm still having some technical challenges. And so if you place a comment there, I'll check it afterwards, and maybe at the end we can answer questions or deal with your comments at that time. And I'm still kind of going through a bit of a healing, so if I'm sniffling and such, just pray for me. I'm fine though. In any case, so yesterday I was having a conversation, and I noticed that there was something still on my filter. And by the way, if you missed last week's conversation about healing emotional wounds, you have to hear that one. It was really good. We went into a lot of detail on what emotional wounds are and how to know when you have them. And I'll just give a recap briefly. Let's say you experienced a painful, something happened to you in your life. And last week I talked about perhaps a woman having, or a person having their spouse or mate cheat on them. And the emotions that come up during that experience end up creating wounds that end up on your filter, the filter of your mind. And so what that would look like is if someone cheated on you, now you would start to have feelings of suspicion, or you might feel shame, or you might feel unworthy, or you might feel jealousy, all this stuff coming up. Now you can't focus on the stuff you normally would focus on because you're paying attention to whether or not this person is going to hurt you again. And you're checking their phone, or you're going through their emails, or you're doing all this stuff because there's that residual memory telling you that this person hurt me and I've got to protect myself from that hurt. So I'm going to go through these motions in order to help to prevent that from hurting again. And that's an example of something that will end up on your filter, your mind's filter, to prevent you from really being able to focus on what you've been called and equipped to do in your life. So, you can have all different types of wounds, and all different types of things end up on your filter based on the different types of experiences you've had in your life. And so my last week's challenge to everyone was to just pay attention to your life, to just be gentle with yourself, but notice if you respond in a certain way, or if you find yourself having a reaction to something someone said, just to notice it, because it's potentially giving you a clue that there's a wound there that needs to be healed that you possibly haven't dealt with. And I went on to talk about how when we don't deal with those wounds, it ends up infecting our relationships, and it ends up polluting the communication that we have with one another. And it might show up like in anger, or you might have some type of blow up on someone and they didn't even do anything to deserve it, and you just kind of snapped, or perhaps you're responding in a passive aggressive way. All these things are just cues to kind of show you that perhaps there's something there that needs to be healed. So I said all that to say, excuse me, I do need to take a sip so that I don't sound so scratchy. I said all that to say, the other day I was in a conversation, and something came up for me, and it was the question that maybe I wasn't hearing from God. And I had to ask myself, what is that? Maybe I didn't, maybe it wasn't God that's been talking to me all this time. Maybe it wasn't God that spoke to me on my silent weekend. Maybe it wasn't God that gave me this revelation about what I'm supposed to do with my life. And maybe, maybe I made all this stuff up, and maybe, just that line of thought came back into my remembrance just in a conversation. And it made me question everything. And it's interesting because what that basically told me is that that's still on my filter. I have come to the understanding beyond all doubt that I'm clear that it's God who's leading me and who's guiding me and who's deposited this yearning within me to share with you the way that I do, and to be open and vulnerable, and to study the way that I do. And it's just, I know that it's God. I have no question about that. But that there was still that little thing on my filter that I had to notice, that I had to say, wait a minute, if that's still there, then maybe there's still a wound that needs to be healed, just like I said to you. I told you that this whole journey is going to be an opportunity for me to just use my life as a playground and let you in on my process, so that you could potentially see how maybe the way that I am deconstructing my mind and my thoughts, potentially that might help you to see yourself in a different light, and just give you something else to think about, something else to consider. So it made me track back to where that started. Like, where did all of that questioning come from? And I remember in the very beginning, I had a friend who, well, there were a few different people who in my life questioned me when I first told them about what happened to me on that silent weekend. And I think you remember. If you didn't, you should watch the first 2 videos of Wisdom Wednesdays. I went into detail about what happened to me in the first 2 very powerful spiritual experiences I've ever had that have really marked me and changed my life. But when I started to share what had happened to me, of course, everyone thought I was nuts. They thought I thought I was crazy. I wasn't even in disagreement with them. I thought I was completely bananas. But there was still something in me that knew that there was some truth to what God was showing me, and it had to be God. And the way that He was unfolding things in my life and just kind of confirming it with different experiences, I just knew he made sure that I knew in my knower that it was Him. But to everyone that I would share it with, they all questioned me. Everyone did. And I know that my family thought I had lost it. I know that all my friends and people in their genuine desire to help me, poor thing, kind of, she's going through a lot. She's in pain. She's medicated. So that was kind of the way that they dealt with me. But, in their kindness and in their loving way, they would say things to me that made me want to just question whether or not I'd heard from God. And so I didn't realize that there was still some residual stuff laying around in my mind's eye that could kind of creep up on me. And it did yesterday in a conversation. So I think I've always said that things come up to be healed, and I'm really grateful that happened, because I was able to just really look at it and say, you know what, I'm beyond that. There's no doubt in my mind anymore. I had a friend that asked me a couple of weeks ago, when I shared the story with you guys about how God had written through me and how He had typed word for word to me, and then He went to letter by letter, typing messages to me, writing through me to me. And she said, girl, if I had known you and I didn't know who you are, I would never have believed what you'd said to me. I would never have even believed it. And she said, well, why didn't you share any of the writings? Why didn't you share some of the stuff that God wrote to you? And I said, well, duh, why didn't I? So I wanted to do that today. In my book, and this is a very tattered copy because it's my own, and I wrote it, but I'm studying it as well. I wrote this book I finished it in 2011, and I published it in 2012. It's called The Self-Love Lessons. I don't know if it's backwards for your screen, but 7 lessons every woman must learn about herself and the power of womanhood. And I wrote this book, and it really was more designed to be a chronicling of what I had learned over the the years that I had grown through fibromyalgia and all the pain that I had endured physically and emotionally. And so I use it even to this day. It still ministers to me. But one of the things that God wrote to me as I was preparing the book, I was asking him, what is it that you want the readers to get from this? What impact do you want me to make? And this is what he wrote through me. He said, I want them to know me, and in knowing me, believe me, and in believing me, love me, and in loving me, desire me, and in desiring me, need me, and in needing me, trust me, and in trusting me, surrender to me, and in surrendering to me, receive me, and in receiving me, become me. And then I wrote, in my likeness. So I continued by saying that this is my effort in the completion of the instruction given to me on your behalf. So allow me to create in you a deeper, more intimate knowing of God with an attempt to support you in believing, loving, desiring, needing, trusting, surrendering, receiving, and becoming just as God intended. So that was one of the things that he said to me. And, to have experiences like that and to know that was just one of many. I mean, I have notebooks full of writings and I have documents all over my computer where I've written with God. And so to know within my knower that these things came through me, and then to have that little thing on my filter saying that maybe it wasn't God, maybe that was just you, maybe you just made that up, maybe you're just trying to make yourself seem like you're more whatever. To have that little bitty thing on my filter that makes me question that could become a huge stumbling block for me in stepping out and doing what God is calling me to do. Imagine if I'm stepping out and speaking what I know to be is true, and there's something inside of me saying, well, maybe that's wrong, well, what about this or what about that? That would make me it would challenge my courage, it would challenge my confidence, it would challenge my assertiveness, it would challenge my boldness. It would prevent me from being able to stand knowing powerfully and positively that I am sure of what it is that I'm saying. So do you get what the point that I'm making? That's why it's so important to look at your filter, to see what's coming up, and to just check it and see if it needs to be cleaned off, because all I needed to do is just shake that off. I know better now. I'm clear. I'm very clear that what he's showing me is him, and I'm okay. So so I asked you to do that, and so I thought it might be helpful for me to share it with you that I had done the same thing as we move forward. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, we had mentioned, where did my notes go? We talked about feeling words last week, and we were saying, oh, this is perfect. I was talking about how when we go through our lives and we're looking at these different things that have impacted us, we should pay attention to those things that are on our filters. But the reason why is because sometimes there's a wound underneath it, right? Well, the way to get to the healing part of those wounds is to deal with the feelings that it brought up. And I talked about the fact that we don't use feeling words. We don't ever say, I was afraid, or I'm scared, or I'm lonely, or I'm ashamed, or I'm feeling unworthy, or we never talk about the feeling words that are going on within us. And a lot of times we get stuck because we can't emote. We can't really talk about and move through the actual feelings. So the feelings are the gateway to the healing, and it's unfortunate that we get stuck in them because we have been taught for so many years to stuff things. We consider processing or moving through feelings ignoring them, or pretending that they didn't exist, or pretending that something happened to us didn't happen when that's not the case. So so some of the feelings that I had around this thing that was on my filter was insecurity. I wasn't sure of myself. It made me question my myself. It made me lose confidence. It made me feel inadequate, like I needed to go and do something more in order to qualify, which I know that that's not God. It made me feel afraid to really step out and do what I know to do, because what if I'm wrong? What if I mislead people? Um, what if I don't know, what if someone gets hurt because of my missing God? All of these things came up as a result of that little bitty thing, that little bitty thought that's on my filter. What if my family is impacted negatively because I'm on the wrong path? How does all that look in my life? So, um, what other feelings would come up around it? Um, Shame, obviously, because what if I am wrong and now I've put myself out there and people are watching me, and I've told this story and they're believing me, and now to find out that it's not God, now I'm feeling ashamed of myself, because how dare I get out there and talk about something and now I'm wrong. And shame is such a powerful negative emotion, and guilt and all of that goes along with it. Guilt because what couldn't I have done more? What could I have done more to be sure? What could I have done to eliminate the problem of not being convinced that that was God? Goodness gracious. Wow. I'm glad we're having this talk, because I hadn't thought about all that stuff. But yeah, all of that would be on the filter. All of those emotions would be on my filter. And could you see how that could be a stumbling block for me? Could you see how that could potentially be a hindrance for me being able to boldly stand up and say, this is how I feel, and this is what I know to be true, and this is what happened to me, and this is what God said, and this is what He showed me? And you see how that could prevent me from being bold enough to say that? And then I remember back when all this happened, I had a friend who had been in the church for years, and God wasn't talking to her like that. So of course, in her mind, I was nuts. Who do I think I am, coming into this new understanding, and now I'm talking to God, and I'm having coffee with Him, and He's making me laugh, and I'm joking with God, and I'm telling her about these different things that God is doing, and she was just living with me. I mean, they talked about me, and oh my goodness, it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice at all. And then I learned about it later. That they were having, conversations about how nutty I was. And so little of me, when I just shared the most powerful things that had happened to me. So imagine how that could create a stumbling block. So all this, I'm sharing all this not because I'm stuck in that space, because I'm not, but I'm sharing this just to kind of give you insight into what these emotional wounds look like, and how they could impact you, and how they could create stumbling blocks for you. Because obviously, we talked about the whole purpose of these Wisdom Wednesdays is for each of us to overcome the obstacles that have blocked us from living in our wildest dreams. And my wildest dreams include living in the fullness of the promises that God has given me. I want every single thing that He laid out for me. I don't want to end this part of my journey, my life, with any gift unopened. I want to experience the fullness of it, and I want to eliminate anything that's in my way of being able to do that. So this could obviously be a huge obstacle. So what are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about your own filter? And what has come up as you've listened to me share some of these things about how I've noticed the emotions come up in me? Just think about it. We talked about last week Philippians 3:13, and I'll read it again. Bear with me. And this week, maybe I'll see if I'll read it from the Amplified too, because that's always good. And I need to pull out the Mirror Bible, which will be really great too, to look it up. Um, Philippians 3:13. Okay, it says, Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before. So last week I had talked about how, some people in my life were concerned about the fact that I was sharing all of the things that I'm sharing with you online. And they were saying, girl, just get beyond this stuff. Just move on. Just let this stuff go. Just put that in the past and just move on. And, you're all right. There's nothing wrong with you. And trust me, I know that. I'm doing this not just for me, but for you. I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable and sharing some of the hard heart things in my world, so that you could potentially look at it and say, I see myself in this, or I could see a lesson in this, and that could potentially apply to your life. But the point that I was making is that if we just push everything aside and don't deal with it, it will basically come back to haunt us. I talked about the fact that emotional wounds bleed on the inside, and we can't see that they're bleeding, and that they're getting infected, and that they're festering. We just notice that we're polluting relationships, and we can't seem to keep friends, or we seem to find the same type of man over and over again, or we look at the patterns in our lives, but we don't recognize that these wounds are what's creating those patterns. And so in this passage, he's saying, forget those things that are behind you and press on towards the prize of the high calling. The next verse says, I press towards the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. And okay, so I'm going to read it in the Amplified. It says, I do not consider, brethren, that I've captured and made it my own yet. But one thing I do, it is my one aspiration, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal to win the supreme and heavenly prize to which God in Christ Jesus is calling us upward. Okay, so let's think about this. What I did, and I talked about this last week, we looked at the word forget. And the word forget actually means to fail to remember. Now, if I think about the fact that my filter had on it the idea that I wasn't hearing from God, I didn't have that in the forefront of my mind's eye when I was living my life, as I was moving through life. I didn't have that in the forefront, but it was there. It was in the back somewhere, just kind of just there. And in a conversation yesterday, boop, it popped up. Now, it wasn't that I failed to remember it. I really didn't forget it. It was still there. But what I had actually done, and this is what we always do, and we talked about this earlier, is we ignore it. We stuff it. We just tuck it away. We put it in the back in a drawer, and we tuck it away, and we pretend like it doesn't exist. So when they said those things to me back in the day, girl, you're not hearing from God. Or how do you know that's God? And maybe that's not. Maybe you just making that up. Maybe you had something to drink, or maybe you whatever. Their stuff I just tucked away. They don't know what they're talking about. I know I heard from God. I think because I didn't squash it completely and move it away. It was still there, and so I didn't forget it. I just tucked it away. But what to forget it means to actually look at it and say, like what I'm doing right now, and say, you know what? I know for sure that it's God. There's no way that this could be true. You are not true. If you're saying that it's not God, I've got too much in my life that proves to me that that's wrong. So I can really release this. I can release the emotions of it. I can release the fact that I'm not unsure. I can release the fact that it's a stumbling block. I can release all of that. I can release the shame that if I'm out there teaching what I'm teaching that it's incorrect. I can release all of that because I know within my knower that I hear from God. I'm clear. So that is when you get to the point where you can fail to remember. That's when you can get to the point where you can actually release it. It's once you unearth the emotions that are tying it and holding it hostage. So, and then you can press on. Then I don't have that as an obstacle anymore. Then I can move forward and just do what he's called me to do, not wondering and not questioning whether or not it's him. You see how that works? So anyway, I'm excited. I'm excited. So what else did I want to talk about? We talked about the feeling words and everything. And the whole idea here is that God gave us a brilliant mind. He gave us the ability to do some amazing things, and He gave us the ability. Hold on a second. I apologize. I'm learning how to use these new tools, y'all. So just bear with me. He gave us these amazing minds, and He created our minds to be able to do some wonderful things and to protect us in ways that we can't even imagine. But they've also protected us through our childhood through some painful experiences, and we don't just move through that stuff and it goes away. It stays with us until we really deal with it. So the whole idea in this journey is to renew our minds, and it's really to draw your mind in alignment with God's mind, so that you understand the fullness of who He's called you to be. His intention is for us to understand our identity, our authority, our inheritance, and our assignment. And as long as we have these obstacles in the way, it prevent us from standing boldly in all of that. So I am going to end today's conversation with that, and between now and next Wednesday, let's see if you can just do the same assignment all over again. Just pay attention to your life. Pay attention to how you react and respond to certain things that go on. Notice if you get angry at someone, or if you get frustrated, or notice if you find yourself irritated. Just pay attention to the way that you are dancing through this life, because potentially there is a wound beneath all of that needs to be healed. So feel free to write in your journal about it. And again, if you're writing about it, make sure you use feeling words. Make sure you use words that I felt afraid, I felt hurt, I felt sad, I felt lonely, I felt unworthy, I felt inadequate, I felt invalid, I felt whatever. Use the words that communicate the truth about how you're feeling, so that you can address the feeling itself and actually get to the healing. So again, I am Queenie Brown. I thank you again for joining me on Wisdom Wednesdays, and we'll see you next week. God bless you, and I'll see you at QueenieBrown.com. Love you. Bye-bye.